The boy appeared from nowhere. That was the only way Garrett Holloway could describe it later, when people asked him how it all began. One moment he was sitting alone at his usual corner table at the Sterling Room, the restaurant on the 42nd floor of the Holloway building, the one that bore his name on its glass facade, the one his father had built and his grandfather had dreamed about. The next moment, there was a child standing 3 feet away from him, staring. Not the polite, uncertain staring of a child who has wandered away from his parents. This was something else. This was the stare of someone who had been looking for a very long time and had finally found what they were searching for. The boy was small for his age, whatever that age was. His jeans were dirty at the knees, frayed at the cuffs. His sneakers had once been white. His jacket was a faded blue, one size too large, the kind that gets passed down or picked up at a church sale. His hair needed cutting, his face needed washing, and his eyes were the deep, steady gray of a November sky, just before it decides what kind of storm it wants to be. Garrett put down his fork. He was 53 years old. He had built 3 companies, survived 2 recessions, and been married once, briefly, to a woman who had told him on her way out the door that he confused success with living. He had a corner office, and a driver and a chef and a personal physician, and not a single person in the world who would notice if he skipped dinner. He ate at the Sterling Room every Tuesday night, because Tuesday was the one night his executive assistant, Marilyn, refused to schedule calls after 7 o'clock. And on this particular Tuesday in early November, a small boy in a too large jacket was standing next to his table, staring at him with the gravity of someone who had rehearsed something. "Excuse me," the boy said. His voice was careful, quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from learning early not to take up too much space. Are you eating alone?" Garrett looked around the restaurant. White tablecloths, low lighting, the soft, unobtrusive sound of a string quartet somewhere near the bar. The maitre, Francois, was already moving toward them with the expression of a man who has been trained to be polite about unpleasant things. "I am," Garrett said. The boy's jaw tightened slightly, the way a jaw tightens when someone is working very hard to hold something together. He looked down at the table. He looked at the bread basket at the untouched second place, setting that Garrett always requested out of a habit he couldn't entirely explain, at the glass of red wine that cost more than most people's grocery budgets. Then he looked back up. "Could I?" He stopped. Started again. "Sir, could I sit with you? I'm really hungry." Francois arrived. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Holloway. I don't know how he got past." "It's fine," Garrett said. He wasn't sure why he said it. He hadn't planned to. The word came out before he had consulted himself about it. "Bring another menu." Francois blinked. The boy blinked. Garrett gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down," he said. "Before you fall down, you look like you've been walking all day." The boy had been walking for 3 days. His name was Owen. He was 11 years old. He had come to Chicago from a small town in Indiana called Millbrook, which had 2 gas stations, 1 diner, a Dollar General, and a zip code that most mapping software struggled to locate. He had taken a Greyhound bus with $47 he had saved over 8 months from helping his neighbor, Mr. Delaney, stack firewood, and he had arrived at the Chicago terminal at 6 in the morning 2 days ago, with a backpack containing a change of clothes, a granola bar, a photograph, and a name. The name was Garrett Holloway. He didn't tell Garrett any of this at the table. Not that first night. That first night he ate. He ordered the chicken, because it was the first thing he recognized on the menu, and he ate it the way children eat when they have not eaten in a long time, methodically, with full concentration, not looking up, as if the food might be taken away if he lost focus. Garrett watched him. He had intended to read his messages while he waited for his own dinner, but he found he couldn't look away from the boy. There was something in the way Owen ate, something in the economy of it, the seriousness, that felt like watching someone do something that mattered. "What's your name?" Garrett asked. "Owen." He didn't offer a last name. "How old are you, Owen?" 11. "Are you from Chicago?" A pause. "No, sir." Garrett waited. Owen kept eating. "Where are your parents?" Garrett asked, more carefully this time. Owen set down his fork. He looked at his plate for a moment. Then he looked up, and Garrett saw something move through those gray eyes. Not sadness exactly, but the place sadness lives after it's been there long enough to become ordinary. "My mom passed," Owen said. 8 months ago." Garrett set down his own fork. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it in a way he hadn't meant a social nicety in years. My aunt took me in after, Owen continued. Aunt Patricia. She's my mom's sister. He stopped, looked at his plate again. She tries, but it's a lot for her. She's got 4 kids of her own and her husband's been out of work and He picked up his fork again, took a bite, chewed, swallowed. I needed to find someone. Who? Garrett asked. Owen looked at him. The grey eyes held steady. You, he said. The word sat between them like a stone dropped into still water. Garrett kept his expression neutral. He had been in enough boardrooms, enough negotiations, enough conversations where the wrong reaction could change everything, to know how to hold his face still when his mind was moving fast. He looked at the boy, at the dirty sneakers and the frayed jeans and the careful, exhausted dignity of him, and he thought about many things at once. Why me? He asked. Owen reached into the front pocket of his jacket and took out a photograph. He put it on the table between the breadbasket and Garrett's wine glass. He smoothed it with one hand, carefully, the way you handle something that has been folded and unfolded so many times, it's starting to separate at the creases. Garrett looked at the photograph. It was a picture of a woman. She was laughing at something off camera, her head turned slightly to one side, her hair catching the light. She was young in the picture, mid-20s maybe. She was standing in front of a fountain in what looked like Grant Park, and next to her, with his arm around her shoulder, was a man who was unmistakably, uncomplicatedly, Garrett Holloway at roughly 30 years old. Garrett picked up the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. The woman's name was Lily Marsh. He had known her for 8 months, a long time ago, when he was 31, and building his first real company, and working 18 hours a day, and not thinking clearly about anything outside the next quarter's numbers. She had been a graphic designer with a studio on Michigan Avenue. She had laughed at things he hadn't expected to be funny. She had left coffee on his desk with little drawings on the cups. Not hearts, not flowers, but tiny architectural sketches. The Sears Tower reduced to 6 lines, the bean rendered in 3 curves. He had thought about her for years after. He had looked for her once, briefly, and found nothing, and told himself it was for the best. He had not known she had a child. He had not known about Owen. His hands, he noticed, were not entirely steady when he set the photograph back down. "Where did you get this?" he asked. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "My mom kept it," Owen said. He was watching Garrett with that same careful tension. "In a box under her bed. There were letters too, but," his jaw tightened again, "my aunt has the box. She didn't want me to bring it. She said I was making things up, that my mom never talked about. About you, that the picture didn't mean anything." He paused. "But my mom talked about you to me, when I was little. She said your name. She said you were." He swallowed. "She said you were the reason she believed that good people existed." Garrett said nothing for a moment. The string quartet had shifted to something slower. At the table by the window, a couple was looking at dessert menus. Francois was standing at his post near the entrance, tactfully looking at nothing. "She never contacted me," Garrett said. "I know." Owen's voice was flat, not accusing. "She said she was going to. She said she kept meaning to. She said—" He stopped. Something shifted in his face, something that was trying very hard not to shift. "She got sick when I was 9. She didn't have time to do everything she meant to do." There it was, the thing under all of it. Not the poverty, not the long bus ride, not the 3 days of hunger and searching. The thing under all of it was a woman who had run out of time, and a boy who had arrived at a stranger's restaurant in a too large jacket because there was no one else. Garrett looked at Owen for a long moment. Then he said, "Finish your dinner." It wasn't an answer. Owen seemed to understand that. He picked up his fork. They didn't talk much for the rest of the meal. Owen finished the chicken and, when Garrett suggested it, ordered a slice of chocolate cake that arrived in a pool of raspberry sauce with a small scoop of vanilla ice cream. He ate it with the same focused attention he'd given the chicken, and for a moment, for just a moment, he looked the way 11-year-olds are supposed to look, surprised by something good. After dinner, Garrett had his driver take Owen to the Holloway Grand, the hotel 3 blocks from the restaurant, and arranged for a room on the 14th floor. He told the night manager, a steady, unflappable woman named Carmen, to make sure Owen had everything he needed. He told Owen he would come in the morning. He drove home to his penthouse in Lincoln Park and stood at the window for a very long time. He thought about Lily Marsh. He thought about the photograph. He thought about the 8 months she was sick, and the years before that, when he could have found her if he'd tried harder, and the 31-year-old version of himself who had been too busy and too focused and too certain that the future was a problem he could schedule for later. He thought about a boy who had crossed 2 state lines on $47 to find the name his dying mother had given him. He didn't sleep much that night. In the morning, he had his attorneys make some calls. The first call went to a private investigation firm that his company used for due diligence. He asked them to verify what Owen had told him, not because he doubted the boy, but because he had learned, over 53 years, that hope needs a foundation before you can build anything on it. The second call went to his personal physician, a methodical, discreet man named Dr. Emerson, who confirmed that a DNA test could be arranged quickly and sensitively. The third call he made himself. It was to a number he found through the investigator, a landline in Millbrook, Indiana. It rang 4 times before a woman answered. "Hello, is this Patricia Marsh?" A pause. "Who's asking?" "My name is Garrett Holloway. I believe you know who I am." Another pause, longer this time. When Patricia Marsh spoke again, her voice had shifted into something careful and hard. "I know who you are. And I know what Owen told you, and I'm telling you right now, he's a kid with a big imagination and a lot of grief, and you shouldn't encourage this." Garrett kept his voice even. "He had a photograph of Lily and me. That doesn't prove anything." "No," Garrett agreed. "It doesn't. That's why I'm calling. I'd like to arrange a DNA test. Simple, private, no attorneys involved at this stage if you prefer it that way. If Owen is not my son, I'll know that, and we can figure out the best way to help him from there. If he is," he paused. "If he is, I'd like to discuss this like adults who both want what's best for him." The silence on the other end of the line was the kind of silence that has a texture to it. "He's not your problem," Patricia said finally. "He's family. He's my sister's boy. I'll handle it." "With respect," Garrett said. "You've been handling it for 8 months, and he arrived in Chicago 3 days ago on a bus with $47. I'm not criticizing you. I imagine you're doing the best you can with what you have. But Owen came looking for someone, and I'd like to find out if that someone is me." He heard her exhale, long and slow. "I'll think about it," she said. She hung up. Garrett sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. Then he set it down and went to the hotel. Owen was in the breakfast room when Garrett arrived, sitting at a table by the window with a plate of scrambled eggs and a glass of orange juice, looking out at the street below with an expression that was equal parts wonder and wariness, the look of someone who has learned that good things often come with a catch. He looked up when Garrett sat down across from him. "Did you sleep?" Garrett asked. "Yes, sir." A pause. "The bed is very soft." "Good." Garrett ordered coffee. He looked at Owen, at the boy's clean face, which the hotel soap had restored to a kind of ordinary 11-year-old handsomeness, and at the too large jacket, which he was still wearing because it was the only jacket he had. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." Owen nodded. "Your aunt, did you run away? Or did she know you were coming?" Owen considered this with a seriousness that was, Garrett thought, unusual for his age. "I left her a note," he said finally. "I told her where I was going and why. I told her I wasn't running away, I was looking for something." He looked at his eggs. "She texted me. She said to come home. I texted back that I would come home when I had an answer." Garrett looked at him. "You've thought about this a lot." "I've been thinking about it for a long time," Owen said simply. There was something in that sentence that did something complicated to Garrett's chest. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "I want to be honest with you," he said. "I don't know if I'm your father. I knew your mother. I cared about your mother. But I didn't know about you, and I want to be careful that we find out the truth in the right way. Not because I don't believe you, but because if you are my son, I want there to be no question. Not for you, not for anyone. Do you understand?" Owen nodded again. His gray eyes were steady. "You want to do a DNA test?" Garrett blinked. "Yes, okay," Owen said. He picked up his fork. "I figured you would." The process took 11 days. During those 11 days, Garrett did something he hadn't done in years. He changed his schedule. Not entirely, not dramatically. He was still in his office by 7, still on calls until noon, still carrying the weight of a company that employed 4,000 people in 6 cities. But he made space. He had Owen moved from the hotel to the guest suite in his penthouse. He hired a tutor to keep Owen's schoolwork moving. He had his chef, a quiet, gifted woman named Rosa, ask Owen each morning what he felt like eating, And Owen, who had never been asked that question before in quite that way, spent several mornings staring at the ceiling and coming up with answers like something with cheese and maybe soup, if that's okay with the gravity of someone making important decisions. He learned things about Owen in those 11 days. He learned that Owen was good at math and terrible at spelling. He learned that Owen had read every book in the Millbrook Public Library's children's section twice. He learned that Owen's favorite color was green, not the bright green of things that are trying to be noticed, but the deep green of trees after rain. He learned that Owen didn't like loud noises or sudden movements, the particular cautiousness of a child who has spent time in uncertain environments. He learned that Owen had a way of watching a room when he entered it, taking stock, cataloging exits and expressions, that was both heartbreaking and oddly impressive. He learned that Owen had his mother's habit of drawing on anything available: paper, napkins, condensation on windows. The drawings were good, better than good. There was a spatial confidence in them, a sense of proportion that Garrett recognized without being entirely sure where from. He learned that Owen woke up in the night sometimes. He knew this because he was a light sleeper, and he could hear, through the guest suite door, the sound of the television being turned on low at 2 or 3 in the morning. He didn't say anything about it. He just made sure there were extra blankets on the bed and a nightlight in the hallway that hadn't been there before. On the 9th day, his attorney called. "We have a problem," said the attorney, whose name was Gideon and who had been with Garrett for 20 years. "Tell me, Patricia Marsh has filed for emergency guardianship. She's claiming Owen was taken without consent and is being held in an environment that," Gideon paused diplomatically, "she describes as inappropriate. She has a lawyer, not a particularly good one, but a lawyer." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "She didn't file for this in 8 months, he said. "No, she filed for it 10 days after Owen found me." "Yes," Gideon paused again. "I don't want to make assumptions about her motives. I'm not asking you to." Garrett looked out the window of his office at the Chicago skyline, at the lake glinting silver in the November light. "What do we need?" "The DNA results. First. That changes everything. If he's yours, you have standing. If he isn't, it gets more complicated." "He's mine," Garrett said. He didn't know why he said it. The results weren't back yet. It wasn't logical. But he said it with the quiet, settled certainty of a man who has reviewed the evidence and reached a conclusion, and the evidence was Owen's gray eyes and his spatial drawings, and the way he watched rooms, and the way Lily Marsh had looked in that photograph, laughing at something off camera, and the feeling in Garrett's chest that had been there for 11 days and wasn't going away. "Get the results expedited," he said, "and tell Patricia Marsh's attorney that I'm happy to meet." Professionally, calmly, as people who all want what's best for Owen. He paused. "And Gideon, make sure Owen doesn't find out about the filing." "Not yet." The results arrived on the 11th day. Garrett was in his office when Gideon called. He'd been staring at the same paragraph in a quarterly report for 20 minutes without reading it. 99.9%, Gideon said. Garrett put the quarterly report in his desk drawer. He sat for a moment with his hands flat on the desk. "Okay," he said. "Garrett, I'll call you back." He took the elevator up to the penthouse. It was a Saturday. Owen was in the living room at the long table by the windows, working on a drawing. He had his tongue slightly between his teeth, the way children do when they are concentrating. He had filled 3 sheets of paper with what appeared to be an extraordinarily detailed rendering of the Chicago skyline, as seen from the 42nd floor of the Holloway building. He looked up when Garrett came in. Something in Garrett's face must have told him something, because Owen put his pencil down very carefully, the way you put something down when your hands might not be steady enough to hold it. "Is it?" he started. "Yes," Garrett said. Owen looked at him. The gray eyes, Garrett's eyes, he could see that now with the clarity of confirmed fact. How had he not seen it immediately? Held steady for 1 moment, 2 moments, 3. Then Owen's face did something it probably hadn't done in a very long time. It crumpled. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly, the way faces crumple when the thing they've been holding against has finally arrived and there's no more reason to hold. Garrett crossed the room and sat down next to him. Owen didn't hug him. He wasn't ready for that, and Garrett understood, because neither was he. But Garrett put his hand on Owen's shoulder, and Owen leaned, just slightly, just an inch, into that hand. They sat like that for a while. Outside the windows, Chicago went about its business. A lake freighter moved slowly across the gray water. The Ferris wheel on Navy Pier turned in the cold air. The city did not know or care that something had shifted, that somewhere on the 43rd floor of a building that bore a certain name, a man and a boy were sitting side by side, figuring out how to begin. The meeting with Patricia Marsh happened the following week. She came to Chicago with her attorney, a young man from Fort Wayne who kept straightening his tie. She was a small woman, tired in the way that specific kind of tired is. Not sleepy, but used up, the tired of someone who has been carrying too much for too long. She looked like Lily a little, around the eyes. Garrett noticed that, and it made him careful with her in a way he might not have been otherwise. They sat across a conference table. Gideon was there. Rosa had sent up coffee and a plate of things, because Rosa sent food when she sensed tension, which Garrett had come to consider one of her more valuable qualities. Patricia looked at him for a long moment before she said anything. "I loved my sister," she said. "I want you to know that." "I believe you," Garrett said. "And I love Owen. He's a good boy. He's a hard boy sometimes because he's been through things, but he's a good boy." "I know," Garrett said. She looked at her coffee cup. "I'm not a bad person. I want you to know that too. I've got 4 kids in a house that needs a new roof, and I'm working 2 jobs, and She stopped. It was a lot. Having Owen too. I wasn't managing it the way I should have." Garrett kept his voice quiet. "No one's saying you're a bad person, Patricia. Your lawyer filing back at my lawyer isn't what I'd call friendly." "No," he agreed. "It isn't. That was protective. Not personal." He paused. "I need you to understand something. I didn't know about Owen. Lily never told me. I would have." He stopped. Thought about how to say what was true. "I don't know exactly what I would have done at 31 if she had. I was not, at 31, particularly ready for anything except the next quarter, but I want to believe, that I would have stepped up. I didn't get that chance. But I'm here now." Patricia looked at him for a long time. "He's happy," she said finally. It wasn't a question. But it was. "He is," Garrett said. "He called me," she said, 3 days ago. He sounded," she pressed her lips together, "he sounded the way he used to sound when Lily was still alive, before things got hard." No one said anything for a moment. "I'm not trying to take him away from family," Garrett said. "I'm not trying to erase you or Lily or anything that came before. He loves you. He should love you. You're his family. You took him in when he had nowhere to go, and that matters. What I'm asking, what I hope we can work toward, is something that works for Owen, something that gives him stability and care and doesn't ask him to choose between people who care about him." Patricia looked at the table. "He picked you," she said. There was something in the way she said it, not bitterly, but with a kind of wondering honesty. That made Garrett understand exactly what it had cost her to come here. "He didn't pick me over you," Garrett said. "He picked up and went looking for something his mother told him existed. That's not a rejection. That's a kid doing what kids do, which is trust what their mother told them." Patricia was quiet for a long time. The Fort Wayne attorney had stopped straightening his tie. "I want to be in his life," Patricia said. "I want to be able to call him. Visit, of course," Garrett said. "And I want—" She looked up. Her eyes were wet, though her voice was steady. "I want you to tell him that I wasn't trying to take him away. I panicked. I thought you were going to disappear with him and I'd never see him again." "I panicked. I'll tell him," Garrett said. "Or you can. He'll hear it better from you." She nodded once, sharply, the nod of someone making a decision. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The legal process that followed was not simple. Nothing involving family courts and guardianship transfers, and a child who had crossed state lines ever is. But it moved, steadily through the winter, and by the time the Chicago trees had begun to think about spring, it had resolved into something workable. Garrett had primary custody. Patricia had visitation that they agreed upon together, without much difficulty, because once the fear and the panic were removed from the equation, they found that they wanted the same things. Owen went back to Millbrook once in February to say goodbye to his room and pack his remaining things, and spend a weekend with Patricia's family. Garrett drove him. He met Patricia's kids, loud, energetic, wholly uninterested in impressing anyone, and watched Owen move among them with the ease of long familiarity, louder and more relaxed than Garrett had seen him, doing impressions of a teacher and winning a card game and eating 3 bowls of Patricia's chili without being asked. On the drive back to Chicago, Owen was quiet for the first hour, Then he said, "She feels bad, Patricia." "I know," Garrett said. "I don't want her to feel bad. She knows that." Owen looked out the window at the flat Indiana landscape going dark in the early February evening. "She did her best," he said. She had a lot. "You know?" "I know," Garrett said again. He kept his eyes on the road. "You're a generous kid, Owen." Owen shrugged, the elaborate, unconcerning shrug of an 11-year-old who doesn't want to be told he's generous. "She let me have the top bunk," he said. "For 2 years. That's not nothing." Garrett smiled. He didn't say anything. Spring came. Owen started at a new school. A good one, not a flashy one, because Owen had specifically said he didn't want to go somewhere where everyone had a driver, which Garrett had respected and also privately found funny given the circumstances. He joined the math team. He made 2 friends, a girl named Portia, who was the best speller in 7th grade, and a boy named Sam who had a collection of vintage maps and considered this completely normal. He still drew on everything. He drew on napkins and paper bags and the backs of Garrett's meeting agendas when he found them on the kitchen counter. He drew buildings, mostly. The precise, confident architectural sketches that had started to make Garrett think that somewhere in the boy was something that would need an outlet bigger than graph paper. He took Owen to a gallery opening at the Art Institute, a friend's show, and watched Owen move through the rooms with his head slightly tilted, looking at each piece the way you look at something in your own language. On the way out, Owen said, "Can I take a class?" "What kind of class?" "Drawing. Like real drawing, with a teacher." Garrett looked at him. "What took you so long to ask?" Owen shrugged, then quietly, "I wasn't sure I was allowed." Garrett stopped walking. He stood on the steps of the Art Institute in the April wind, with the bronze lions on either side of them, and Michigan Avenue spread out below, and looked at his son. His son, that word that was still new enough to feel like something important every time it arrived, and thought about all the months Owen had spent not sure what he was allowed to want. "Owen," he said, "you are allowed. Whatever it is you need, whatever you want to try." He paused. "You are allowed, all of it. Okay?" Owen looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded. They stood there for another few seconds in the kind of silence that isn't empty. "Can we get hot chocolate?" Owen asked. "Absolutely," Garrett said. They walked down Michigan Avenue in the April wind, a tall man and a small boy in a jacket that finally fit right. Garrett had quietly replaced the too large blue one in January, with Owen's grudging permission, and the city moved around them the way cities do, enormous and indifferent and full of people carrying their own stories. Owen reached over without looking and took Garrett's hand. It was a small gesture, a child's gesture, the kind that costs nothing and means everything. Garrett held on.